Ever find yourself caught in a swirl of rudeness and wonder, is it just me or are people different? Well, you're definitely not alone. In this episode, we dive into the world of incivility and workplace toxicity, why it's spreading, how it impacts us at work and home, and what we can actually do about it. Buckle up for a fun, eye opening chat about turning down the toxicity and turning up civility in our daily lives. Welcome to We've All Done It, the podcast for leaders who know they've screwed up and are ready to fix it fast. I'm Kimberly Benoit, author, speaker, leadership coach, and Southern girl living outside of Washington, D.C. Here's what I believe. Every leader faces challenges and makes mistakes, but you don't need years of therapy-style coaching to fix them. You need someone to help you figure out what's actually going wrong, make smart adjustments, and get back on track quickly. That's exactly what I do through one-on-one coaching, targeted skill development, and group programs. Every episode of this podcast delivers real talk about common leadership pitfalls, practical strategies for recovery, and no BS guidance to improve how you lead yourself and others every single day. Whether you're here to listen and learn, or ready to work together and make real changes, you are in the right place. Now let's get to today's episode. Welcome back, everyone, to We've All Done It. I am Kimberly Benoit, and we have a very fun guest today. Today, we're going to be talking with Dr. John O'Brien. He is a clinically trained psychologist, which I love that, going back to my old stomping grounds, who has leveraged that knowledge and experience to now really focus on professional speaking. And he's doing some amazing executive coaching work around a topic that I think will resonate with most of us today. It is all around helping people and organizations bring more civility, calm and compassion to our daily existence. He's recently written a book called Rudeness Rehab, Reclaiming Civility in the Workplace and Your Home Space. And I think this is a perfect time to have a wonderful conversation about incivility, or on the flip side, how do we bring more civility back to our spaces? So welcome to the show, Dr. O'Brien.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. It's nice to be here. And please call me John. The only time you doctor is to try to get through the front lines of front offices in primary care, or maybe with an insurance company with an attempt to get some respect. It never works anyway, so let's just go with John.
You know, in my clinical experience working in healthcare, I find that it falls into two camps. Either it's only call me Dr. So-and-so, I have earned said title, or
Yes.
It's your case of just call me by my name. It's fine.
Yeah.
So John it is.
Good.
All right.
Good.
So let's jump right into this.
Let's do this.
Tell me why rudeness? Why civility? What drew you to this topic?
Well, I've had a clinical practice now for almost 30 years, but about 9 years ago, it was actually, I was at the Society of Consulting Psychologists meeting, and I heard Dr. Christine Porath speak about the topic of incivility, which, by the way, interestingly enough, she was talking to a group of psychologists, and one of the members of the group was very uncivil to her in the presentation on incivility. But that's beside the point. I heard her speak and about the insidious but really profound impact that incivility can have on workplaces and on people in general. And that really got me thinking about the idea that people need skills to manage this in our society. That kind of got pushed to the side. And then the pandemic hit, and I thought, oh, surely now we will come together as a society and support each other. And it just got worse. And then as we started to come out of the pandemic, I thought, oh, now we're going to treat each other better. But then it just got worse. So I had just have a very kind of busy life. And I thought, I just don't have time to write this book, but I made the time because I felt like we all need skills and awareness about the impact it can have, but what to do about it.
So first off, I find your timing of things very I appreciate the timing of it, right? Because again, I remember the early days of COVID. I felt like for maybe like 2 days, I felt like the world was like, yes, And then to your point, things unraveled so very quickly. And I don't know if the raveling ever returned. But for the sake of the show, how would you define incivility?
So I think of it as rude and inconsiderate behavior that creates stress in the person who's being targeted by the behavior. But interestingly enough, research shows it also impacts people who witness it, and even boomerangs back to the person who's being uncivil, who may or may not realize that they're being perceived as uncivil.
So in your expertise, so talk to me a little bit about, so you're saying there's an impact, but what is the impact? When there is a lot of rudeness, like I have some assumptions about what the impacts are.
Okay.
Just from personal observation, but from your professional experience, having written this book, what do you know the impacts to be? What is data telling us, science telling us?
Well, I do want to just make a distinction too that I think is important for your listeners to understand is some people make the distinction between rudeness and incivility, that rudeness is intentional, incivility is unintentional. I personally don't make that distinction because I think people can be perceived as rude without intending to be. So that's why I think of them as interchangeable. But I think it's important people understand that there is that distinction in the field.
That's fascinating because I kind of align with your thought, because I know people who are rude who definitely intend to be rude. Like that is their goal, is to inflict discomfort on someone else. But that's an interesting distinction. I guess I hadn't thought of it in that way. So coming back though, so knowing, regardless if it's intentional or not, there's definitely an impact. I think we're seeing it across the globe.
Yes.
But how do you define that impact?
Well, if my book talks about the workplace and your home space.
Yeah.
So there are impacts in both, and I'll just kind of touch briefly on each. So in workplaces, when there's incivility, it can erode team collaboration, communication. What people talk about is psychological safety, feeling okay taking risks in a team. It can impact people's confidence and willingness to be putting themselves out there. So it impacts productivity and so many things, which again can then impact team performance, et cetera, in workplaces. In terms of people's personal lives, that when we experience rude behavior, I would say most primarily when it's directed at us, but even when we witness it, it can stay with us both cognitively, in terms of we can be ruminating about it, churning over what happened. Sometimes if someone's experienced incivility directed at them, they'll be ruminating about how they have been treated so unfairly, and then plotting about how they're going to get back at the person. But it also then, stress in our bodies leads to, problems with physical problems, stomach aches, headaches, distractibility, concentration problems. So, and over time, that stress can build up and lead to things, when it's chronic, things like depression or anxiety, substance abuse problems, things that we're seeing really skyrocketing rates.
Yeah, it was funny because as you were talking about the rumination, before you even said it, I wrote retaliation.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I feel like frequently what I see more and more, and some of this is not necessarily in person, but I definitely feel like you see it more in the virtual space because you're not in front of them. I feel like that makes people a little more brave or brazen. Is the intention of like punching back, and so what you end up seeing, and I think this is whether you definitely in workplaces or personal spaces, it's the ratcheting up, right? Well, if the rudeness exists, then I can be rude too. It's almost like permission to continue to engage in behavior that doesn't actually get you anywhere productive in the long term.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I would just add to that I think in the virtual world, people don't have that in-person connection, which when you have that in-person connection, sometimes you can deal with whatever has happened in the moment and learn it wasn't intended, or you're interpreting something differently from what someone has said. You also have the full experience of the person, kind of in the flesh, if you will, versus virtually there's a lot that people can project onto what the other person has said or done, or they make movies in their head about what's happened and what they're going to do. And that disconnection, that lack of actual physical connection, I think can supercharge the rudeness and the rumination.
So while I'm thinking about it, I recently did a training with a group of people. So project managers, some leaders, and there was an interesting revelation that came. So because we were talking about giving feedback, right? So when you talk about like someone intentionally being rude, that can happen sometimes when you're giving constructive feedback, right? Some people can perceive it a certain way, even if you don't want it to be perceived that way. And I was very intrigued when they said that, because their clients are who they are. It's very decentralized. Everything is virtual. Even the people in the room were meeting each other for the first time.
Ah.
Some of the and a comment was made of like, I wouldn't have known who this was. I only knew him by his voice, and it's because of the kinds of work that they do. Cameras can't be on.
Oh,
So it's virtual, voices only. And
wow.
and so one of my first thoughts, and something that we addressed in there, was how easy it would be to misinterpret, because you don't have the visual cues to say, like, you're just, tone is very important, but not to be able to even see with your eyes, like, what is happening with that person and how that can feed into maybe unintended bad feelings because people misunderstood the message because of maybe the wrong tone, and they couldn't see you in order to kind of connect the dots in the way that humans need to really communicate fully. And so I'm wondering how much of sometimes, like, given especially younger generations, like I can't even say younger generations, I mean, my parents text all the time too, but how sometimes things can be misunderstood in our virtual spaces because of that. Like I think about like people who text a lot in caps or a lot of exclamation points. That can be interpreted as screaming. But that may not be the intention. But you know what I mean? Like how much is fed into this rude, incivil space by sheer accident and circumstance because of the method of communication?
I think it's a huge part of the miscommunication, misunderstanding that can happen. I was talking about this years ago with my intro to psychology class, but the fact that, when you're texting or you're emailing, there can be a lot that gets misinterpreted. And I had a student say, Professor O'Brien, that's what emoticons are for. And I was like, emoticons? So then they educated me about emoticons. I was like, I'm still not convinced. Okay. Because first of all, and I saw something recently about people my age and older who are misusing emoticons, like not using the right emoticons when they think they are. And so, I mean, emoticons are great, but they do not solve the problem that we are discussing, which is misinterpreting things that are getting communicated electronically.
Yeah. I mean, and just so you know, they're emojis. Emoticons were probably how they're emojis now. So
Well, see, this is why I need help.
I'm going to help you out. My 13-year-old nephew keeps me honest. Don't be mid. Don't be mid. Like, there's a whole language. But that, I think that's case in point, right? Is particularly, I would say, when you're looking at multi-generational spaces, and that can be a family, that can be a workplace.
Absolutely.
Is the method of communication matters and how easy it is to misunderstand. Because even if you have the right emoji, what's around that emoji matters. Again, is no differently than your tone matters or your body language. Like there's so much context where I wouldn't even say I know people walk away with a certain interpretation, and how easy it is for us to just get lost in this and then walk away feeling very angry where we then return to the rumination and retaliation process in our brains.
Absolutely. I think also thinking about what's the person's baseline before they even get the text message or email.
Yeah.
Like, how are they feeling? Because that also can influence how the message gets interpreted.
Well, and the challenge with communication in general is you can't control anyone else.
Right.
You frequently have no idea what is happening with another person. Even when you think you know, you probably don't really know. And assuming the best, if you catch them at the wrong moment, that right message is going to resonate in a very different way than maybe it intended. Like, I just feel like so much of what we do, like there's some intentional stuff.
Yes.
But I also think there's so many spaces where unintentionally we have stirred pots that we didn't intend to, that only create in these environments to thrive.
Yes. And I think, in the book, I talk about also how culture can influence this and how some cultures are more direct.
Oh,
than
tell
other
me more.
cultures.
Tell me more.
Well, the example I give is what I've learned in developing my ability in German over the years. That and this was illustrated to me also when I was taking German class several years ago, and I was reading a German fairy tale, Das Rotkäppchen, Little Red Riding Hood, and we know how fairy tales end in English, and they lived happily ever after. In German, it ends, and if they're not dead, they're still alive today. So we think about the differences in those messages, and then you translate that into German culture, where as my friend who had a grandmother in the United States and a grandmother in Germany, and she said, well, I say things to my grandmother in Germany, in German, that I wouldn't to my US grandmother. And I said, oh, like what? I'll say to my grandmother in Germany, Grandma, I hope you're still alive the next time I visit. We would not say that in English. But Germans are known for, in that culture, being very direct. And it's not just Germans, there are other cultures. But the problem is then if Germans come to the US and begin to speak English, but with that same directness, they are perceived as rude when that's not the intention.
You know, it's so funny because I would say that even exists here in the US. So a perfect example. So I am originally from Southern Louisiana, lived in New Orleans for over 20 years, and moved up into the DC area about 3 years ago. And how people do business is very different. And because people always ask me questions like, oh, it must be so different. And they're always surprised, though, when I talk about this one difference. And I was like, the way people network here and engage in business is very different. In the Northeast in general, whether I'm talking to someone in Pennsylvania, New York, DC, it's very transactional. Within the first 5 to say 8 minutes, you need to be able to clearly communicate who you are, what you do, and what you can bring to the person you're talking to. And vice versa. Like, they're not interested in niceties. They don't care where you're from. They don't care anything about you. That is not the way you socialize or network or engage in business in the Deep South. In the Deep South, people want to know who you are. They want to know where you're from, where your kids go to school, where you went to school. If you're in New Orleans, they want to know what part of the city you live in, what Mardi Gras cruise you ride in. Like, they want to know who you are as a person because they want to do business with people they like and that they have some kind of meaningful connection with. Up here, they don't care. If you because if you bring that to the table, you're wasting their time.
Yeah.
Because when I first came, I was like, wow, this is kind of rude was the name. Actually, I think I used that word. I was like, because they were so abrupt and short. And I was like, man, these people it's rude. It's mean. Like, do you not even care about people? And it's just, their perspectives are just so different. Versus I can imagine a northerner coming down to the South and you can't start business because if you start business too quickly, then that's also seen as rude. That's also interpreted as, all you care, that's just not that's not what they value. And I think I can see where again, where we can rub each other culturally simply because what we value may be different, and how we talk about those values plays out in a very different way.
Yes. And that's just, we also are not necessarily aware of it because it's
Yes.
just embedded in who we are, but we are not aware of it until we bump into that difference. And I'm like, wow, what's wrong with this person? Either, as a Northerner myself, like, why is this person telling me all this stuff? Are they trying to, are they not being direct with me about
I don't
themselves?
need
They
your
must have
life
something to hide.
story. I don't
Right.
need your
Yeah.
life story.
Let's just get down to brass tacks, they're being evasive versus, again,
Yeah.
someone from the South,
Yeah.
don't you care about who I am?
Yeah, but and the interesting part to me though is how that could be interpreted as rude
Yes.
on both sides. Like, how
Yes.
rude, you're wasting my time. How
Right.
rude, you don't care about who I actually am. And so, like, again, and they may both need each other, but how quickly we approach it very differently. So, but that ties back in. So, for people who are listening, we have a lot of people who listen that are leaders, right?
Mhm.
So, what would be your thoughts about approaching something where you felt something has been done to you in a rude or incivil way? What advice do you give for somebody who feels slighted in this capacity?
So there's many different variations on that theme, Kimberly. It's obviously going to depend upon like workplace, home space,
Yeah.
or workplace. Is it a direct report? Is it a peer? Is it a leader? But what I would, just one general comment that I think fits everywhere
Yeah.
is the basic skill of active listening.
Mm.
Because if someone says something rude, we immediately can get into our reactivity and want to respond or retaliate. But I think, again, with the skill of active listening, instead of responding with what you think, you are reflecting back to the person by saying things like, what do you mean? Or how so? Or like, say more. Or I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
By saying those things, you're holding up a mirror and you're getting the person to rephrase or repeat what they've said. Sometimes that gets people to rephrase what they've said in a way that you realize they didn't intend to be rude at all. Or sometimes the person was able to rephrase it because they themselves realize, ooh, that was too direct, or that wasn't what I meant. But if nothing else, if they double down and they are still saying something really rude, that at least gives you time to pause
Yeah.
and think about, okay, and how am I going to respond to this and not simply react? So I think active listening to help clarify what's happening here and giving you an opportunity to think about what you want to do is probably most foundational for any environment.
Yeah. My thoughts when you were talking was the importance of being curious.
Yes.
And I would also add the caveat of, as you're curious and asking these questions, which I think are so important, is to be mindful of your own tone.
Yes.
Right? So, because your emotions will be heightened. And the last thing you want to say or imply in your own tone is that your own incivility of like, tell me more, is very different than, I just want to make sure I understand. Can you tell me more about why you feel that way? So your tone will either help or hurt that situation.
Absolutely. Great point, right? Because saying, what do you mean? Or what do you mean is very different.
I tell people frequently, it's not the what, it's the how.
Absolutely.
Like we know the right things to do. Sometimes how we execute them is the challenge, and being smart about it. But I actually really like that, because I think that foundational advice of active listening, be curious, can apply in any circumstance.
Yes.
In life, no matter where you are interacting with something that may feel rude or incivil. Would you recommend doing like the paraphrase, like just to make sure I understand, this is what I heard you say? Or do you recommend that, or do you think that that's not good? Would you prefer just the different kinds of tell me more and bringing it back to them?
So I'm going to give a real psychologist answer, which is it depends, right? I mean, I think the paraphrasing can be useful.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but it really depends upon context. If you know the person, if you have a good pre-existing relationship with them, like you already have more connection with them, you might be able to take it to that next level of paraphrase.
Yeah.
But depending upon the topic, or depending upon the person, if it's more of a kind of contentious topic, or if it's something you don't really know well, I think keeping it more neutral, because the risk is in paraphrasing, your wording may come across as judgmental or uncivil, and then that you're starting the incivility party. So I think it's, quote, safer to be more neutral and just asking the person for more information first.
Yeah, and there was a reason I asked that, and because I feel like particularly in a lot of things, and I've been coached to do this, is sometimes to paraphrase back because that helps someone understand what you heard. And
Exactly.
I appreciate that the idea of it depends on context, and it also depends on if you can separate yourself from the emotional sting of whatever you're trying to clarify,
Yes.
which is
Right.
hard.
It absolutely is. It's very hard, right? But it's again, that's where self-awareness is really a foundational skill in life and in leadership, is to be aware of your own reactivity and really working to manage that.
So let's be very specific. So say you are in an office environment and you're seeing some stuff happening on your team. And again, we're in a very political environment, and things are popping up in different places. It gets projected in different ways. There's a lot of, I feel like people are running on edge most
Mhm.
of the time. So if you are a leader and you are seeing some behavior on your team that is troubling or concerning to you, what advice would you suggest a leader take? And again, I understand context, but like, are there one or two things that you're like, these are things that you can start to either think about or do to help you move this from the environment you're in to maybe a more civil space?
Well, two things come to mind. One is if you have someone specifically who is, quote, the bad actor, who is just really on a tear, well, approaching them individually outside of that meeting and talking with them a little bit about, especially if this is not what they typically have been. I mean, maybe there's something going on for them in their lives and their stress is spilling out in a negative way in
Mm-hmm.
the workplace. So I think this is not something that you want to address in a group, or even like going to their cubicle and talking to them in front of other people. This is a one-to-one conversation in closed doors. Hopefully that would be automatically what a leader would do. But I think, and trying to get the person to understand, and I think I often suggest people say, leaders talk about, how do you think that, for example, if someone's been rude in a meeting, how do you think the meetings have been going? And I'm curious if you're aware of how you're being perceived, because I don't think you would. This is what I would say. I don't think you intend to be rude right now, even though they may be. But in other words, if you're leading with positivity, you may not be intending this, but this is how your behavior is being perceived.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that having those one-to-one conversations. Another possibility is, I don't, some leaders have had conversations with their team about like team expectations, communication patterns, what are ground rules for team meetings. I think those are essential. And if you start to see that people are straying from that, or things are starting to get hostile or contentious, to bring people back to a conversation, not about content, but about process. Like, how do people feel about the way meetings have been going? And sometimes, again, depending upon the context, sometimes people will feel comfortable um, actually saying what they feel. And sometimes leaders will ask that question and it's like, boop, pin drop. Nobody's willing to say anything. And
Yeah.
then it's up to the leader to say, well, this is what I've been noticing.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if other people are noticing that. And I think that's having an impact on so talking with the team about how the team is talking is
Yeah.
important.
No, and I appreciate that you added that caveat in of how to have the conversation. Um, I So one of the things that I've noticed and I want to always be very mindful of is that we can't assume leaders know the right things to do.
Exactly.
Because in COVID, I saw so many leaders, now leaders, be promoted who were wonderful individual contributors, but received very little to no leadership training.
Yeah.
And so, yes, these kind like the one-on-ones, I want to emphasize a tremendous deal, need to be happening in a private setting as much as possible. And then open it up. I like the idea of bringing it back to the team though, as well. But, and because I do think so much of the frustration that I feel we see is it's just the cumulative wearing down over the last decade.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like as a society, as a world, I don't know if people really appreciate how much chaotic behavior has existed in the last decade. And that's a lot for anyone, even at a broad scale. Like we know what the big things were, like the big pandemic and all these things. But personally, the impacts that it has on people privately. So coming back to assuming the good intent, even
Yes.
if it doesn't look like good intent, but as a leader, assuming good intent and coming and trying to get to the root cause of what's driving the behavior. Because we may, as leaders, we frequently don't know the whole story until we get really curious and start getting deeper into the questions.
Yes. And that sometimes there's something happening on the team or in the workflow that we're not aware of, but that actually is the root cause of the behavior that you're seeing. That behavior is a symptom of something else happening.
Yeah, yes, I abso-freaking-lutely. I mean, again, like I feel like so many times, like things we're seeing are projections, and there's usually a lot more underneath the surface. But because we're all tapped out, stretched out, burned out, that it's just easy again to come back to that. I'm going to ruminate on it and I'm going to sting them back because that'll feel good in the moment versus like, hey, how do we actually, for the good of this team, for the good of our culture, come back to center and say, okay, we don't want to behave this way.
Yes. Well, and I think
standard.
Getting people to think about, going back to that treat others as you wish to be treated. That,
yeah.
And you can't, you were saying before, you can't control what other people do, but you can control what you do and how you respond to other people. And if we want a better environment in the team or in our country or in our families, then we can only change what we do.
Absolutely. So as we're rounding out this conversation, I cannot let our talk end, this episode end, without giving you a chance to talk about your upcoming TEDx talk, which congratulations, my friend. That's quite the accomplishment. So
Thank you.
Tell us about your title and what the talk's about.
So perhaps not surprisingly, it is a talk about incivility. And the title of it is Small Slights, Big Consequences, the Power of Everyday Incivility. The talk has a few stories. The story of, and as its basis, the story of a faculty interview when I was interviewing for a faculty position, and they won't spoil the talk. But so I talk about that, my experiences with that, and then go on to just we have here talked about the impact that incivility has on people's health and wellness at work, but more importantly, as individuals. And I tie that to the increase in chronic disease and even the high rates of mortality still in some people in our society. So, and then go on to teach people some skills. And there is even a costume change in my TED Talk, which I will not spoil, but listeners will have to go see once it comes.
I am so excited. So when is it? Do you know when it's coming out?
Well, the first draft just came to me from the organizers. So I'm guessing it will be probably maybe by early July, maybe sooner.
So here's what I would say.
Yes.
Links to connect with you are going to be in the show notes. So please go follow because I plan on watching this talk. Because, and I was, my first thought when you were talking about like all the health outcomes related to incivility, I was like, well, if you look at the United States health metrics, we're just telling on ourselves all over the place.
Yes. And just interesting factoid briefly, do you know what the differences in life expectancy are for people in our country based on the county they live in? How many years?
No.
Want to guess?
Oh God, I'm scared. How bad is it?
You want to guess?
No.
That's it.
No.
20 years. 20-year difference based on where you live in our country. And of course, there's a variety of factors that go into that.
Yeah.
But stress is one big variable in that.
Wow. Well, I was going to say in Southern Louisiana, it also could be our diet.
Right. There's diet, right? Mm-hmm.
But
lifestyle factors.
But 20 years. Wow.
Yeah.
That's well, again, it's not surprising. Like if you actually sit and think about it and think through all the tiny components that make up how one rude thing, like one action can the ripple effects of one action.
Absolutely.
I think we underestimate it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, because our attention is constantly being drawn to more and more things. So we know the cumulative effect of it is pretty significant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really love this topic. And your book, tell me about your book. Where can people get your book?
So it's available on Amazon. That's probably the easiest place to get it. Rudeness Rehab, Reclaiming Civility in the Workplace and Your Home Space.
Wonderful. And I'll have links for that in the show note. Read it. This is good work. I think if we want to change our society, we want to change culture, we have to start with ourselves. And this is the work that we have to do. So I am so happy to have you on the show. I'm so happy to have you be a part of this and to support you in your message. And when that TEDx comes out, I will be pushing it. I'll make sure and share that on LinkedIn because I think it's important stuff. This is, again, it's the small things that matter the most.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Kimberly. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. All right. See you in the next episode, everybody. I've got two things before I let you go. One, if you've ever gotten any value from the show, please leave a 5-star review. It really helps and absolutely makes my day. The second thing is if you have any thoughts you'd like to share with me, please shoot me an email at podcast@KimberlyJBenoit.com. I'd love to hear from you. All right, see you in the next episode.